Some of you may have read or maybe even seen Jonathan Greenblatt's new book. It's called It Could Happen Here. By the way, am I too loud? A little. Okay. Better? Better. Okay. So some of you may have read or seen Jonathan Greenblatt's new book. It's called It Could Happen Here. In that book, he starts out with a story that I want to share with you this morning. It's a story of when he goes back to his grandfather's hometown in Magdeburg, Germany. It's a lifetime aspiration of his to go and to visit his grandfather's hometown where his grandfather grew up before the Shoah. And so he finally makes it back, and he has all of these sort of great hopes of what it will be like in that community and what the visit will be like when he can go visit the community that his grandfather was a part of. So he arrives in the town, he gets to the visitor station or the visitor center, and he goes in, and there are two women that are standing or sitting there, and they are in sort of a big empty room with some books in German in the bookshelves. So Jonathan says to the two women that are sitting there, he says, I'm here because my grandfather grew up in this town, and I wanted to come visit and to see where he grew up and to see what the Jewish community was like and to visit the synagogue. Can you point me in that direction? So the women sort of look at him with very confused faces, and then they start to talk to themselves, and he realizes that maybe they didn't understand what he was asking. And so he sort of pares it down a lot, and he asks the question again, and he says, my grandfather, he's Magdeburg, he grew up here, Jewish, Jude. And the ladies start squinting, and they say, dein grandfather, Jude, your grandfather is a Jew. And they turn to each other, they start sharing words, exchanging words again, and then they say in broken English, your question, we no understand. Nobody has ever asked it. There are no Jews here. What do you want? So Jonathan Greenblatt explained that he knew, of course, that there were no Jews left in that community in Germany, and he knew, of course, exactly why that was. But he said that hearing it said out loud felt like a punch in the face, and that the sadness enveloped him. And then he continued, many Americans think that it is unimaginable that hate will ever come for us or our loved ones. We live in the United States, after all, a place of laws and human rights and democracy. Nothing like what happened to the Jews in Germany could ever happen here. And then he went on, and he said, my grandfather used to think this way too. He once shared that he could never have imagined. He was born and raised in Magdeburg. He grew up riding his bicycle on the cobblestone streets. He boxed in the town youth groups. He was a fierce player on the soccer pitches. And then Jonathan added, hate doesn't devastate its victims right away. You might not feel particularly threatened where you live, but make no mistake, hate can come for you. Half a century from now, your grandchild might visit the town where you currently live, inquire about you and your community, and receive nothing but a blank stare. It was 1913 when the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, was founded. The catalyst of its finding was actually an incident that happened in Atlanta at a pencil factory right outside of Atlanta. It was a young girl who was raped and murdered at that pencil factory. And the manager of the factory at the time happened to be a Jewish man named Leo Frank. He was the factory manager, and of course, he was a Jew. He was accused of the rape and murder. And despite exculpatory evidence, he was wrongfully convicted of the crime. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, but actually, he was ultimately lynched by an angry mob. Anti-Semitism then in the 1900s was a staple of American life, and that incident inspired the Jewish community to respond and to try to fight the hate. And in fact, the Anti-Defamation League was created in order to secure justice and fair treatment for all, based on the premise that America could not be safe for the Jews unless it was safe for all its people. Since then, there has been no shortage of hate. Of course, these days, the trends are actually quite alarming. Between 2015 and 2018, the anti-Semitic incidents in our country doubled. In 2019, we hit a new all-time high. Things we remember like Poway, California, New Jersey kosher supermarket, and Pittsburgh, and the list goes on and on. And most recently, of course, extremists and activists around the world are using rhetorical violence against Israel, the Jewish state, and its supporters, equating Israel and Zionists with Nazis, calling for Israel to be eliminated, directing anti-Israel messaging at synagogues and other Jewish institutions. This rhetoric is creating an alarming spike in real-world violence that's increasing exponentially in the United States and all over the world. The rise of hate has truly become a global phenomenon. Why so much hate, though? Well, it seems that scapegoating, which we read about today in this week's Torah portion of Acharei Mot, shows us that human beings always have a tendency to scapegoat. Even if you go all the way back to the times of Adam and Eve in the garden, people always look to deny culpability and are usually quick to blame others. But why the hate and why now? Well, there are those that say that there are 6 primary reasons that we see increases of hate. One assumes that hate is always with us, that it is a latent psychological impulse. The second idea is that social change and instability, which can include political unrest, mass unemployment, influx of refugees, pandemics, and wars, all of those things can awaken and intensify the phenomena of hate. A third reason is that when human beings feel desperate and uncertain, and when dominant institutions and systems fail to deliver solutions, society becomes more vulnerable to scapegoating. Society looks to blame someone or something for the struggles. The fourth reason: leaders who use hateful speech fan the flames of hate. Nowadays, hate is surging on the left and on the right. And of course, additionally, social media creates for us a worldview through the information that we consume, where conspiracy theories and disinformation are as ubiquitous as legitimate news. The result of all of these things is a subtle but pervasive normalization of hate. And very few people, including leaders, who are willing to monitor, and very few people who are willing to condemn the hate. Deborah Lipstadt, the ambassador to the United Nations on anti-Semitism, as well as Samantha Power, oftentimes share these words: the hate that begins with the Jews never ends with the Jews. And a society that tolerates anti-Semitism invariably witnesses racism, xenophobia, and all other forms of hatred that divide people from one another and to ultimately make our communities less safe and less humane for everyone. This week, New York City Mayor Eric Adams was willing and courageous enough to speak out and condemn the hate. He said at a press conference that there is a movement right now to radicalize our young people. He saw it after witnessing the craziness at New York City colleges and universities on Tuesday night. He was not afraid to name that this is not only a Jewish problem, this is a global problem. That young people today are being influenced by those who are professionals at radicalizing our children. And he shared that he is not going to allow that to happen as the mayor of the city of New York. The mayor was right. In fact, just yesterday, Francesca Block, a writer for the Free Press, found some answers to how the Gaza solidarity encampments at universities across the country that we're seeing are working, and exactly how they are teaching our young people to be militants. As it turns out, the Free Press obtained 9 different manuals that all were created in order to train kids, students, our students, to be militants. The manuals are shared by phone group chats with students across the entire country who are being told and instructed to encourage militancy. They are being instructed to break laws, to seize buildings, to vandalize buildings, and then to use tactics to evade police detection and arrest. One of the guides called a de-arrest primer. It actually teaches the protesters to physically resist arrest, or in some cases, to assault police officers or throw projectiles at them to protect fellow comrades from arrest. Each de-arrest, the guide states, is a micro-intifada which can spread and inspire others until we finally shake off this noxious ruling order altogether. Another manual, this one called the Do-It-Yourself Occupation Guide, contained detailed diagrams of how to break into buildings and how to use tools. They gave instructions of how to use barricade doors with heavy furniture to create a shield against police. It taught them how to use trash cans, ropes, sheets of cardboard, or corrugated metal banners to pick locks. And then it said, if these less destructive methods don't work, use more aggressive options. These were, in fact, the techniques that we saw that were used by Columbia students on Tuesday night when they stormed Hamilton Hall. Protesters smashed through the windows of the hall's main door with their hammers. They used their metal chains to lock them shut. They broke multiple glass doors and they barricaded them with chairs, refrigerators, and their vending machines. Of course, that was before they asked that they be provided with snacks and meals. 3 of the guides encouraged college protesters to erase the distinction between students and non-students. So for anyone who's curious, of the 282 people that were arrested on Tuesday night between Columbia and the City College of New York, 48% of them were actually not affiliated with either university, according to the New York Police Department. As Mayor Adams so rightly said, there are forces at work to radicalize American college students. Tomorrow night begins Yom HaShoah. A local survivor of the Holocaust, Isaac Dannon, will come here to Bethel at 10 o'clock in the morning to speak about his experience of the Shoah, the Holocaust, to speak about a time when the worst of humanity and when the most hate prevailed. Isaac will tell a story of hiding in the forest. He will talk about when he joined the partisans and he fought against the Nazis. And it will be an incredible opportunity for people to hear from a survivor who's in his 90s, an opportunity that might never come again. So come if you are able. Yom HaShoah in Israel is actually A little bit different than Yom HaShoah in America. Yom HaShoah in Israel is actually called Yom HaShoah Ugevurah. It means a day of remembering the Shoah, the Holocaust, and also remembering the resistance or the strength of those who fought back. Like Isaac, our speaker tomorrow, like New York City Mayor Adams, like the Jewish kids at UCLA who came out in hoodies and tear gas and put an end to the madness on campus after a young Jewish girl was beaten unconscious at UCLA. Like the fraternity brothers at UNC Chapel Hill who encircled the Jewish kids to stand beside them. Those who refused to let the Palestinian flag replace the American flag on their campus. And the fraternity brothers at Arizona State that broke down the encampment there. And then, of course, there's a UC college that decided to play the video of October 7th on a big screen on a loop outside of the encampment. This week's Torah portion, it teaches us that scapegoating is not new, that bad stuff, really bad stuff, happens. And it also teaches us that we can rise up against it determined, that we can do our very best to stamp out hate, and that the actions that each and every one of us takes in this moment of time, they will make a difference. The Anti-Defamation League said, never again, my friends, is now. Shabbat Shalom.